shows, man, the Sports Center, ESPN News, Pardon the Interruption, Around the Horn, quite frankly, um, Outside the Lines, Baseball Tonight. You know what I mean? I watch sports, dog. That's what I'm trying to say. I watch sports, man. That's what I'm into. Sports. Every sport. Hockey, golf, basketball, football, of course. Baseball. You know what I mean? I got a favorite team, a favorite player in every single sport. I'm not going to answer those questions.
Thank you all for tuning in. You're listening in to Q&A on W.C.C.U. Radio, Coastal Carolina University student radio station. I am the A in Q&A, your host, Addison Taylor. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Hope you're enjoying your day so far and staying as warm as possible. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, or if you've been with us frequently throughout the show series, what we're doing on Q&A is giving you a new perspective on all athletics today, and we're covering all sports and all topics, folks. I'm going to jump right into it, and I'm actually going to switch things up a little bit, and I'm going to go in reverse order with my topics today, just to start out something different. UFC, folks, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. If you're not on it, get with it. Right now, I'm talking about the UFC 184 live from the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. And this fight right here is headlining, folks, and it's the main event, and it's featuring two women in the bantamweight class. We have Ronda Rousey, who's the bantamweight champion right now, versus Kat the Alpha Zingano. And I know folks are probably asking, what is the significance of this fight? How big is this fight? Can these ladies really fight? Things like that. And I'm a big fan of the UFC. I think UFC has kind of taken over for my generation or the younger generation's interests, kind of how it was previously for some of the older folks with boxing, back when it was prominent in the 70s, the 80s, Mike Tyson in the 90s, early Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya, Sugar Shane Mosley, Sugar Ray Leonard, guys of that nature. So, this is, I don't want to say UFC has taken the place of boxing, but it's actually become a really big sport. And it's actually very popular. If you into that type of fighting style, they're definitely entertaining fights and entertaining weight classes as well. The bantamweight for these women, the weight is 135 pounds, and Ronda Rousey is currently and has been holding this bantamweight title for some time now. Media Day was yesterday, and the question that I've been asked is, Ronda Rousey finally due for a loss? And I'm going to break down the tape for you folks, and I'll let you decide. Both women are coming into the fight undefeated. Ronda Rousey is 28 years old and 10-0. Zingano is 9-0 and 32 years old, so not that big of an age difference. For me, the thing is, when you think about the UFC and you think about some of the things that have transpired as of lately, as far as the men athletes go for the UFC, and I think I'm pretty accurate in saying this. First of all, Dana White has done a phenomenal job in branding the UFC. The UFC is a brand, it's a culture. And right now, the face of the UFC is Ronda Rousey. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's amazing. Not strictly just because, she's a woman and making it a sexist thing. It's not about that at all. She's a phenomenal fighter. She calls herself, the most dangerous person on earth with two hands. And if you've ever watched her, folks, and even if you haven't, go to YouTube, go online, use some of the various media platforms that we have out there, all this new technology, and really check out some of her fights. They go on very quickly, but, she's a phenomenal fighter, and she works very hard. I've done some research on her myself. She does a lot of training in the off season. She doesn't have that much of a layoff in between her fights. She's fighting on a consistent level. Um, and right now, folks, I'm just going to hit you with a couple of numbers, and I'll let you decide. Rousey has won 8 out of her 10 fights through submission, preferably the arm bar. And, if you're somebody that's into wrestling or wrestled before, maybe on the high school collegiate level, you know about some of these submission holds and things like that, and they're very hard to get out of, and really, very hard to, actually contain and put on somebody enough to have them effectively tap out. First, I'm going to give you the list of Kat Zingano's fights, and the order in which that she's won these fights. She is undefeated as well, but I'll break down the numbers, and that's what we do on Q&A. We go to the numbers, we go to the statistics and the facts and the references. That's what we do. So her fights from the most recent up until her most outdated, her fights last 2 minutes 30 seconds, 3 minutes 40 seconds, 5 minutes, 1 minute 54 seconds, 3 minutes 37 seconds, 4 minutes 42 seconds, 3 minutes 32 seconds, 2 minutes 55 seconds, and 1 minute 21 seconds. Like I said, folks, those were the numbers for Cat Zingano, and she can fight. I've done my research on her as well. Obviously, Rousey is the most prominent person in the UFC today. And for me, that's also an influential part in the reasoning behind me thinking that she's going to win this fight and can, going to continue to have success in the UFC because she is currently the solo face of the UFC right now. On the men's side, we know about the failed testings and the failed procedures and some of the social things that have come out about some of our really most prominent fighters. And, I can also say, John Bones Jones, who is the men's champion right now, who is really competing with Ronda Rousey as becoming the face of the UFC. He's gone through some turmoil lately, and some of his personal decisions have been put into the media as well. So with him, having his troubles, one of my favorite fighters, potentially my favorite fighter of all time in the UFC, or one of them for that matter, Anderson the Spider Silva, failed a drug test as well. Nick Diaz. We've seen this for some time now, even going back to Chase Sonnen. There's been a history of some illegal, maybe some foul play going on in the UFC, but because it's such an ultimate, fighting championship like the name states, these things kind of get overlooked. But I think it's wonderful that Ronda Rousey has continued this success. Dana White, I don't know if he knows exactly what he has in her. Not saying to keep riding the wave or to extort her or get things out of her like that, but she's the real deal, and she really puts up great fights. She puts up great numbers, and people really come support her. And it's not just women; it's men as well. If the girl can fight, the girl can fight. I'm going to compare her, and I'm not comparing as fighters or things like that, but she reminds me of kind of how, and I think my fans will be familiar with me if you kind of know boxing a little bit on the opposite side of the spectrum. Layla Ali, when she was having some of her early runs, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, things like that, she was on the top of her game. She was beating girls up, but she was also in the spotlight as well, for being a beautiful girl, being well spoken, carrying herself well, and, just putting in work. And you have to respect that. So right now, folks, I'm going to give you the current bantamweight champion, Ronda Rousey. I'm going to give you her fights, the same order and the same way that I gave you Cat Zingano's fights, and you can compare the numbers and see how different and who's better. Like I said, Zingano's fights, I think the lowest was maybe 1 minute and 21 seconds, which is not too long. But folks, when I tell you, when I spit out these numbers of Ronda Rousey, it's mind blowing. Are you ready? 25 seconds, 49 seconds, 25 seconds, 39 seconds, 4 minutes, 27 seconds, 54 seconds, 4 minutes, 49 seconds, 58 seconds, 1 minute, 6 seconds, 16 seconds. Obviously, when you see the 427, you see the 449, even the 106, Rousey is being tested. It's not like she's being thrown in the ring with some amateurs, with spectators, with novices. She's going against women who do this for a living and who fight for a living. So I'm not trying to discontinue anybody who's jumping in the ring with her, or anybody who's trying to have success in the UFC on the female level. But this girl's unstoppable, man. I mean, you would think going into a fight with her, what she's going to do. But, like I said, not on that Layla Ali level, but on that elite level, like she said in her interview, Zingano can be at the best at her game, and that's still not comparing to her on her worst day. And you have to appreciate that confidence because you know how much work she puts in. For this one, folks, as much as I want to give Zingano a fair chance, even when I look at the numbers and breaking the numbers more down, Zingano her takedown percentage and her takedown accuracy is 100%. Ronda Rousey is only 72.22. So, Zingano has better numbers when it comes to some of the accolades and some of the different, factors and variables that go into the fight. But when you look at the total body of work, and in the UFC, that's what you really have to do because anything can happen on any given night. You've seen some of the classic fights, and there's been some big fights. And the UFC is definitely competing with boxing. It's kind of, seemingly taking over boxing. But like I said, it's all a generation thing. We, my generation, the younger generation, came into UFC, really gaining its momentum and gaining its power through fighters and through the video games and things like that. I mean, we know Chuck Liddell, we know Rampage Jackson, um, even John Jones as well, in his longevity that he's had, and not losing that many fights and things of that nature. So, I think it goes and it ties into, like we talk about on our show, most of our perspective on sports nowadays, are because of generation, and that's what we're kind of varying and having these different opinions on things because we look at sports a different way because we're coming up in a different time of sports. Real quickly, folks, before I jump into my next topic, I want to say something really important here, and I hope everyone's listening and tuning in. I want to say rest in peace to NBA pioneer Earl Lloyd. Lloyd died yesterday at the age of 86. And I'm only mentioning these folks because, I hate to be cliche, Black History Month, things of that nature, but, Earl Lloyd is not a name that's usually, popular or familiar to, some of the younger generations when it comes to, being familiar with some of the people that broke these barriers. Jackie Robinson, just to use the most prominent example. And I'm not, putting these two on a pedestal. I'm not saying you're supposed to compare them or things like that. But, folks, let's really dig deep and let's really become familiar with some of these pioneers because, they're really patriarchs for the game. And not only the game, but for humanity as well. Breaking barriers, allowing everybody to, have that camaraderie and play together and play the game that they love together. At the end of the day, folks, the common denominator is always the sport. That's the one thing that keeps us all common is the sport and the sport that you're participating in. So, let's give some praises and some condolences to the Lloyd family, to Earl Lloyd as well. He made his NBA debut in 1950 for the Washington Capitals. Graduated from West Virginia State. So I just want to say rest in peace, Earl Lloyd. Thank you for what you did, and you'll forever be a patriarch to the league and to humanity. On that, folks, we're going to jump into our next subject. Adrian Peterson versus the National Football League. Folks, Adrian Peterson, his indefinite suspension by the NFL has been overturned by the judge. U.S. District Judge David Doty ruled in favor of Peterson and the NFL Players Association's request to overturn the NFL arbitrator's ruling to keep the suspension in place. Wow, folks. Things are starting to really get crazy. The NFL will place Peterson back on the commissioner's exempt list while the appeal is pending. When will the NFL learn? Of course they're going to appeal. I have a quote right now from the Vikings head of player personnel. Adrian Peterson is an important member of the Minnesota Vikings, and our focus remains on welcoming him back when he is able to rejoin our organization. I keep seeing quotes and I keep seeing segments like that, and I think they're very interesting. And I just want to make this clear. First of all, in no way am I supporting the conduct that Adrian Peterson produced and showed to his young child. I'm not agreeing with that at all. I'm not saying I agree with abuse or any other subjects of that nature. We don't support those things on Q&A, W.C.C.U radio. But at the same time, I can understand where Adrian Peterson is coming from when he says things like he felt ambushed by the Vikings. And even senses of betrayal. You know, the NFL has definitely changed, in a short amount of time because, of the Ray Rice incident and things like that. But at the same time, we've also been shown that the NFL can also get it wrong. Um, we talked about this on one of the first segments of the show. My favorite team, the Carolina Panthers, same situation between them and defensive end Greg Hardy. He was indicted on charged, but at the same time, he fell victim to what's becoming a common factor in the media nowadays, and that's being persecuted and found guilty before he's actually being put in court and brought into the legal and the justice system. The charges against Greg Hardy, they were dropped. So now he's, looking to be reinstated back into the league and to be able to play again because he missed a significant amount of time last year. And I can understand him for that. But the thing is, the NFL, knowing that he's already been cleared and he's been cleared legally, are still placing players on this exempt list and doing things like that. And I think it's wrong. I think Commissioner Goodell is over his head. I don't understand. If the U.S. District Judge ruled in favor, then I don't understand why the NFL is still going to appeal. They still want to put Adrian Peterson in that loop, in that rock and a hard place where he's still kind of teetering, on the subject and can't really make any decisions. But right now, folks, I'm going to ask the question, and this question is only predicated off the thoughts and the foreshadowing that Adrian Peterson will be taken off the exempt list and he will be reinstated to the league and he will have the opportunity to either go back to the Minnesota Vikings or play for one of these other teams that I have on my list who are searching and pleading and begging and who desperately need Adrian Peterson's services. Where should AP play? That's the question. For me, if Adrian Peterson does have the opportunity to come back, there are 4 potential teams, or 5 potential teams when you include the Minnesota Vikings, who could use his services, who have the money to pay for his services, and who are also in the best interest of him and his career. I'm going to state those 5 teams for you folks. I'm going to give you who I think is my favorite, or who I think, should he go to. We have the Dallas Cowboys, 1. 2, New York Jets. 3, the Chargers. 4, Indianapolis Colts. 5, of course, the Minnesota Vikings. And honestly, folks, once I really look at this list and I'm being realistic, if Adrian Peterson has the opportunity to come back and he is granted and blessed that wish, and he knows in his head and in his heart that he does not want to be a Viking anymore, there are only 2 teams on that list that you just should, consider going to. That's 1, in no particular order, the Dallas Cowboys, of course. Pending what the Cowboys do with DeMarco Murray, and of course, and even though these players aren't in the same position, but money-wise, you have to have the money to bring AP in and keep him consistently there. Dez Bryant. And, there's been a lot of anticipation, upon Dez Bryant receiving that franchise tag, which we all know that he does not want. But I digress. For me, folks, if I am Adrian Peterson, the only team that you need to think about on that list, and the only team that if you jump on that team and that roster, it will make them immediate title contenders, that's the Indianapolis Colts, folks. Think about the team. We have Andrew Luck, which, as much praise as he's, getting from coaches and staff and the media and things like that. And, the guy can play. I'm not, denying that at all. But obviously we know that he has a tremendously high upside. Everybody, the next John Elway, and he's the next, he's going to be the greatest of all time, things like that. So, obviously by his look and play from his team in the playoffs, we see, that the Colts should have been there, but at the same time they shouldn't have because they didn't really have the personnel to get there. They just have Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton and a couple of those boys. We know what's going on with Trent Richardson. We know he's a bust. Adrian Peterson, if you have that opportunity, man, brother, you have to go to the Indianapolis Colts. There's nobody else to go to. There's no one else to play for. They have a great coach. I'm not really going to say they have just great staff because we know about Irsay. We know about, some of the transgressions that he's had off the field, and he's kind of been lightly penalized for those things. But once again, I digress. But for his stature, meaning Adrian Peterson, or for his game, or for his continued career success, this guy can ball. We know Adrian Peterson can ball. So, if you have the opportunity, take those talents to Indianapolis because that's all they're missing is a run game. We have T.Y. Hilton. They know what T.Y. Hilton can do, and they still can't stop him. You have the veteran leadership of Reggie Wayne. You have this, leadership of guys that have been there for a while and, young guys who can play. I think their average age on that team is maybe, I think, 28 or 29, which isn't too old. Getting into that 28, 29, 30 range is tough, but, those are more the veteran players like Reggie Wayne and things like that. If you look at the young group of players that's, found cohesion and actually putting up their numbers statistically as individuals, like the TYs, like the Andrew Luck, like the Bartons, things like that. You understand that this team is just a few players away. So, like I said, I don't want to jump to conclusions. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know, how sometimes the National Football League could be, I'm trying to find the best terms to use, petty or catty or, things like that. Obviously the NFL, with everything that has happened, they've kind of become chickens with their head cut off. As soon as they see something, as soon as they hear something, they're quick to jump to it. They're quick to speculate. They're quick to do this and do that. And, it's not right, but we understand. And that's, what, people and fans have to look at when they look at, the NFL and things like that. It's all a business. And the NFL is only about one thing, folks. One thing. And that is protecting the NFL. It's not about anybody else. It's about cutting those checks. It's about, increasing and continuing these businesses and these new stadiums and things like that. So let's not get it twisted. It's not really about attacking Adrian Peterson. It is, but at the same time, they're attacking all these guys like that. So it's become a mindset for the National Football League, and we have to break that. And by breaking that, the players have to do better off the field, and that's just it. They need to stop putting themselves in predicaments and giving others the chance to critique them and judge them and things like that on these various media platforms. And like I said, folks, I just want to reiterate this. I don't want anybody to, misconstrue what I'm saying at all. I'm not supporting Adrian Peterson. I'm not supporting the alleged allegations that went on against Greg Hardy. I'm not supporting what we saw from Ray Rice in his video. I'm not supporting any actions of that in any way. But I'm all about fair due. I'm all about justice and law. And I'm all about not perpetrating these guys in the media and really, finding them guilty, before they're even processed legally and systematically as they should be and as the United States government grants them the access to. Whew. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. I apologize for ranting. But like I said, he's being put back on the commissioner's list, the exempt list, while the appeal is pending. And really, that's just the NFL saying, like, listen, yeah, the judge might have let you off scot-free, but let us let you know something. Before you can get back to making money, we're not even going to give you the chance to do that while you're not on the field. We're going to put you on that exempt list so you can't make any money. We're not going to give you any more money. And, yeah, you can ask the question, well, he doesn't play for the NFL, he plays for the Vikings. But who do the Vikings play for? The NFL. Let's get real, folks. But like I said, I've made my pick. I'm hoping that he doesn't get, that he does get granted access back to the league. Excuse me. Um, if I was Adrian Peterson, and not strictly on the basis of the Minnesota Vikings and then them ambushing him, them him being thrown under the bus. These are all quotes that Adrian Peterson has used. I'm not saying that in any way. It's not really so much demeaning as it is. It could possibly be a new slate for Adrian Peterson, and that's what I'm trying to say, folks. It's not really about dissing the Minnesota Vikings and things like that. I understand that Adrian Peterson is in a hard place and he feels betrayed by them. But at the same time, when things of this nature come about, the best thing for both parties in this incident, which that's only Adrian Peterson, the Vikings. Sometimes it's best to split ways, because we would hate for him to come back to the Vikings and there be an issue or things like that or some misconduct. So, honestly, I feel like it's in his best interest to take his talents elsewhere, start fresh. Not a whole new career because he's been in the league and he has longevity and tenured in the league, but he's still healthy. He can still play. He can still ball. He's still putting the numbers up. He was still close to breaking, Emmitt Smith's record and things like that. So let's not hate on this guy. I mean, as far as his antics off the field, I don't support them in any way. But as far as him as a player, if he's been legalized, and you have to give him his dues. So, Adrian Peterson, if you can do that, man, and you can get out of that, and you can become a free agent or whatever, what have you. If the Colts want you, man, that's where you got to go. If not that, then the Cowboys. But it's either you or DeMarco Murray. It can't be both. But we know that Jerry Jones wants him and that he'd love him there. So we'll see what happens. On that note, folks, we're going to take it to our next topic. We're going in order. We're on good time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening today. And if you don't know, you are listening to Q&A on W.C.C.U. Radio, Coastal Carolina University's student radio station. And now you know. I don't know if anybody saw the highlights last night. There's been a lot of uproar and a lot of talk about this. Vanderbilt coach Kevin Stallings totally berated one of his players last night, Wade Baldwin IV, on live television against their opponents at the time, which is the Tennessee Volunteers. We're talking NCAA men's basketball, folks. And what happened was Vanderbilt coach Kevin Stallings was told, Wayne, and there's film and there's there's evidence of this, so there was some unsportsmanlike conduct, but after the game, Wade Baldwin IV can be seen clapping, his hands, not strictly off of excitement, but also off of, maybe taunting a little bit, being a little flashy, things like that. You know how it is when you're excited after a game and you're a young player. But he can be seen clapping, and one of the players of the Tennessee Volunteers, Armani, I can't quite think of the first name, but I think he's one of their small forwards. And he could be seen getting in the face of, him after the game as they're getting into their lines, to do their congratulations and, hand claps and things like that and their greetings at the middle of the floor. So Baldwin can be seen clapping his hands, doing those things. And apparently, from what I've seen from it, is that he was told by the Tennessee Volunteers coach when they came together and met after the game about the misconduct that he was told about from Baldwin. So what Vanderbilt coach Kevin Stallings did is he went back, and this is all on film, folks. You can go on ESPN. This is all on wax. It's all on video. You can go on ESPN and look at the video. You can go on YouTube, and you decide. You decide. But I have a couple points here that I want to share with you. I want you to understand. And we're only talking about this. We're only talking about this, folks, because of what Coach Stallings said, and I'll get to that. So he snatches up Wade Baldwin IV, by his arm, kind of like he's a little kid, when you used to get in trouble and, grandma or auntie or whoever that adult figure in your family was, that adult female figure snatched you up. Getting snatched up. You know what I'm talking about. So, he got his arm pulled. He pulls and kind of drags Baldwin to the front of the line. During this whole time, he's cussing at him. He's using explicit language. I'll get to when I say the best quote, I'm not saying it's, funny or things like that, but when I say the best quote, it really stood out to me. It really sums up, Coach Kevin Stallings in this whole ordeal, and I'll get to that. Anyways, where I was at, he snatches him and he brings him to the front. He's cussing, he's asking the Tennessee players, who is he doing this to? Who is this unsportsmanlike conduct being shown to? Things like that, so that you can see, and it's on video. And I don't, I'm going to say this: I don't think that Coach Kevin Stallings knows that he was being recorded. He can't know, because if he did, I don't think he would have stated some of the things that he stated. But you can see his body language that he's extremely upset. I mean, I'm not going to say at one point like he was going to hit him, but once you see what this guy said, you can't really put a finger on what was going to happen, folks. So he makes him apologize to the player, to the coach as well. He's in his face. We don't do things like that. He's cussing at him. I'm not going to, use those quotes because, of the explicit language, and I want to give you a healthy sound for your ears, and that's not good at all. But the most prominent quote, Coach Stallings told Wade Baldwin IV that I'm going to blank kill you, or blanking kill you. He told Wade Baldwin IV that he was going to kill him. And honestly, and he's done the post-game press conference. He apologized, but I still don't think that he knows, or he can't know, because of how lightly he took it. When he talks about, and when he apologizes after the game, I understand I should have handled it differently and things like that. But, Vanderbilt is a classy institution. We're all about sportsmanship and things like that. And I understand that, and I understand enforcing that. But at the same time, I don't quite think that Coach Stallings showed the best sportsmanship, for the camaraderie of his, coaching staff, or in this specific player, or his team, or the opposing coach's team. You didn't need to call him out like that. You could have had him go up there, apologize, kept your communication at a lower level, and then scolded him or whatever you needed to do once you got back into the locker room, as coaches typically do, especially tenacious coaches like Coach Kevin Stallings. He said he was going to kill him. He was cursing him out in front of the opposing team, pulled him in front of the other team coaches, said he was wrong. Honestly, folks, he could have asked him to apologize, like I said, and still scolded and, went on to berate him into the back privately. I think that would have been better to do. But at the same time, and I want people to understand this, I'm going to make 2 quick points and 2 quick examples about this. And I have 2 parts. Like I said, there's a better way of how he could have handled it. He could have definitely used better language. He could have definitely not used explicit language. He definitely didn't have to say that he was going to kill the guy. But in retrospect, and it's always about giving a different perspective. Q&A, the difference between us and this show and, the First Takes and, the Michael Wilbons of the world and things like that are, all of those guys are of the same age bracket and the same age range. Nobody's really giving you sports from our younger generation's perspective. And we look at sports differently. We don't look at sports like these other guys do. And that's why we're giving you Q&A. But honestly, folks, in retrospect, this really, the words I'm going to use is not a big deal, but those aren't really the best words I could use. But in retrospect, it's not a big deal because coaches now are nicer than they are or they were before. Let's not get it twisted, folks, and act like we've never seen this before, okay? In the 2 examples I'm going to use, one is Bob Knight. Let's be fair here. People are talking about, should Coach Stallings be fined? Should he be penalized? Of course he should be penalized. Of course he should be penalized. But these 2 examples that I'm about to use right here are really powerful and prominent coaches that have been penalized for things. But it's almost like, back then it was more common. Now, you have these one and dones. You have the Andrew Wiggins and the Jaleel Okafors and the Karl Anthony Towns of the world. And, I'm not comparing Wade Baldwin IV to that at all. But, this guy was, I think, one of the top ranked shooting guards or small forwards coming out of high school a few years ago. So, obviously, this kid can ball. Vanderbilt's not the best school, but it's not the worst either. And you can't just exactly sneeze and get into there. Let's be honest. But folks, let's really break it down. With these one and dones, coaches have changed. I'm not saying Coach K is just a nice coach. I'm not saying Coach Jim Boeheim for Syracuse is just a nice coach, or Coach Roy Williams is just a nice coach, or Frank Donovan for Florida, Bill Self, Kansas. You kind of have you have to have that tenacious mindset to win these titles and to get these players and things like that. I completely understand that. But for the media, they need to understand that you can't really crucify Coach Stallings without understanding where the game and NCAA coaches have come from. And like I said, I'm going to continue with the example I was using with Bob Knight. Let's act like we've not seen this before. Reportedly choked players. We've seen the classic videos of him throwing chairs. And I'm not trying to downgrade Bob Knight's success at all. I know how much of a great coach he was because I've studied him. He coached at Army in Indiana. These are his numbers, folks. He's 902 and 371. That's a 71% winning percentage of all time. That's big time. Look at that gap. 902 and 371. But at the same time, let's be serious. Don't forget that, Neil Reed, who played for Bob Knight back in that time frame, reported and claimed to be choked. And at the same time, we might not have saw the video, but we saw the video of him throwing chairs, and we actually did come to see the video of him looking like he put his hands around Reed's neck. So, let's not just act like, this is just unfamiliar behavior from NCAA men's college coaches, because they show it all the time, folks. We just don't always see it. And the players don't always come out and talk about it. But this time, and like I said, folks, it's all about generation. It's all about today's society. These coaches can't do anything without being recorded. They can't do anything. There's cameras everywhere. And that's what I'm saying. Coach Stallings, I don't think he really knows that he was being recorded to that magnitude, because everything's on wax. It's on tape. The next thing I'm going to do, folks, and the next example I'm going to use, and one that I know more about than, Bob Knight, is John Chaney. Coached at Temple. We know about this guy. He told Coach Calipari that I'll kill you. You remember, I'll kill you. He did the same thing. Look at the video. Look him up on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in John Chaney. You can type in John Chaney controversial moments. Anything will pop up. Let's not forget about the past. John Chaney, let me read this quote out to you. If the refs continue to let it happen, I'll send one of my goons to run through one of those guys and chop him in the neck. That's what he said about back in during that time frame, 80s, 90s, when these coaches were really doing their thing. St. Joe's had a forward, John Bryant, who was playing against Temple and, their rivals during that time. John Chaney was complaining about, the referees and about their rivals setting illegal picks. And, it came to be known that after that game, that St. Joe's forward, John Bryant, had his arm broken. So let's not act like we haven't seen these tenacious coaches before, but folks, it's the gap is just not there, and, the coaches aren't the same. And, but they're still giving that same, it's almost kind of a common denominator between the coaches. You have to have that tenacious mindset. But, if it comes down to disrespect, then, these coaches have been disrespecting players for years, folks. So let's not, act like we're just so perplexed and so bewildered that this man made these statements, because, coaches have been doing that for a while, and they always never really seem to, concede to, what they've actually done. After the game, Baldwin the fourth was quoted saying, "I'm not upset. Coach is a fiery guy. That is why I came to Vandy." As he's supposed to say. What is he going to say? He doesn't want to leave the team. He didn't want to lose a scholarship. He didn't want the boosters to come against him and rival against him. It just runs deep, folks. This stuff runs really deep. But like I said, the big deal is that it could have been done behind closed doors, but let's also understand that This isn't the first time it's happened. It's going to continue to happen. And it happens more than we think. But we don't see it. We just don't see it. So, should Coach Vandy be penalized by the institution? I rule in favor of yes. Next, folks, we're going to jump into Major League Baseball. Is Josh Hamilton's loss the Angels' fault? Los Angeles Angels outfielder Josh Hamilton reported a drug and alcohol relapse during this most recent offseason. There was a confirmed meeting with MLB officials on Wednesday about a disciplinary issue. No specifics were offered about the nature of the event, so it's looking like just a relapse. He reportedly told Major League Baseball of the relapse, and I guess I can really applaud Hamilton for that, for being a man and owning up. But should Hamilton's loss be considered the Angels' fault? On this, folks, I could say yes. And I'm just going to go back in time a little bit. Josh Hamilton was suspended from baseball from February 2004 to June 2006 for issues related to drug and alcohol addiction. He did, and I guess I'll go from most recent, he underwent shoulder surgery early this month and is expected to be out to at least May. He's not with the team right now at spring training in Arizona, for that matter. There's been some disciplinary problems from him before. He took off the entire 2003 season, did not play. And this man did not play professionally from July 2002 to July 2006. But, he did sign, prior to the 2013 season, he signed a 5-year, $125 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels. One of the conditions of Hamilton's reinstatement in 2006 was that he would undergo drug testing 3 times a week. He had an alcohol relapse in 2009 and 2012, bouncing back in between to make back-to-back trips to the World Series when he played for the Texas Rangers, and he won the 2010 American League MVP. For me, I have to say that this can be counted as the Angels' fault. Not strictly, predicating what he's done or that he should be, let go by the Angels or things like that. I'm not going to run that deep because, he's the one that made the report. So, he has to own up to that. But I can say that, by the way it's looking like the Angels are handling Hamilton, it's looking like their fault. Like I said before, folks, he's not with the team at spring training in Arizona. The Angels have permitted Hamilton. Check this out, folks. The Angels have permitted Hamilton to stay at a friend's house in Houston while he rehabs from the surgery, even though players typically stay with their teams in those situations. It's almost like the Angels know something. It's almost, you signed him prior to the 2013 season. All of the stats and the statistics that I've spit out to you, were early in time. So the Angels knew about all this before. And I'm not saying don't forgive a guy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm always the one that's up for, being forgiven and, strikes and getting rid of strikes and things like that. If a guy's paid his dues, he's paid his dues. And, Josh Hamilton has done that. But, at the same time with this most recent relapse, and I'm not predicating, it being the Angels' fault strictly off of that. But that combined with what I just read to you, being permitted to stay at a friend's house in Houston while he rehabs for the surgery, it's almost like the Angels are like, do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. Their manager can be quoted as saying, we're just waiting from a decision from New York. That doesn't really sound too concerning. It sounds kind of like you've been waiting on it. You knew something was going to happen. But at the same time, maybe, the relapse or whatever, what have you, wouldn't have necessarily taken place, if you would have had him, in Arizona. Even if, that shoulder was still bad or whatever the case may be, you could have still had him traveling with the team. But, instead you left him on his own. You have him at a friend's house in Houston when he should be getting ready for, 182 game season. I don't know, folks. I don't really get it, but you know, we know that the guy can ball when he's in the league and active. He was an All-Star from 2008 to 2012. He was a Silver Slugger 2008, 2010, 2012. Like I told you before, he won the 2010 American League Most Valuable Player award. In 2010, his slugging percentage was .633, which is first. His home runs, he has 192 home runs, which is 36th overall. That's not bad. There are guys who played in the league for years who aren't on that list. So I'm not dissing his game in any way. I'm not trying to diminish what he's done at all. But, we need to understand that, these organizations can't be that dumbfounded. They have to do, their due diligence, and they have to, put in that work and really be systematic and strategic when you handle players like that. I'm not saying watch him, give him his nightlight, tuck him into bed, and, keep somebody on him and watch him 24/7. I'm not saying that. He's a grown man. He's had a tenure in the league for a while now. But, the thing is, okay, he's had past things done, and that's fine, and he's gotten over them. But as the Angels, don't put him in a position where he can, mess up. Bring him with the team. Why are you having him, separated from the team and things like that? So, the Angels, they need to do better as far as their player personnel. And they definitely don't need to throw Hamilton under the bus or look at him in any really negative light. Even though you kind of have to because of these allegations. But at the same time, if you've forgiven him all this time, this time it's kind of your fault because you put him in that position. So, when it comes down to the question, is Hamilton's loss the Angels' fault? He could be out no later than May for that injury. Like I said, he underwent shoulder surgery earlier this month and is expected to be out until at least May. So if he comes back healthy then, but he also has some penalties from Major League Baseball officials, then so be it. But the Angels need to know with handling him in the future, and him being under contract through I think 2017, that you can't put him in a predicament like that. You can't set him up like that. You're almost setting him up to fail. So the Angels, you need to do a better job because really, and I'm gonna keep it short and sweet, and I'm gonna leave it at this before I move on to my next and last topic of the day. You can't put all your cards on Albert Pujols. You just can't. You just can't. So you need to treat Hamilton better because he's kind of been there. When he has been there, he's been there, when Pujols hasn't. I heard Pujols say the other day, being quoted as saying he's going to try to do his best to play 160-something games straight. Anyways, last topic of the day, folks. Last night, the Cleveland Cavaliers played the Golden State Warriors. Cavaliers won 110-99, and the question is, are the Cavs the best team in the league now? They played last night. LeBron James scored 42 points. Cavs won their 18th victory in 20 games. Are they the best in the league now? No. Have they been the best team in the league since the All-Star break? Yes. The Cavs are 18-3 since LeBron James returned to the lineup on January 13th. LeBron was 15-25 from the field. He's definitely Mr. Versatility. Thursday was his fourth career game with 40 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and a blocked shot. Michael Jordan is the only player in NBA history to do that more often than LeBron has. He outscored the Splash Brothers, and if you aren't familiar with the Splash Brothers, that is the combination of Klay Thompson at shooting guard and Steph Curry at point guard for the Golden State Warriors. Some people call them the best shooting backcourt of all time. Anyways, LeBron outscored the Splash Brothers 42-31 combined from them. The Cavs shot 53, and with these numbers that I'm about to spit out, folks, this is kind of jumping up, piggybacking up, what we talked about last time with with LeBron and him going down as the greatest player of all time. I just came out with that stat about him being versatile. Look at this. The Cavs shot 53.2% when LeBron got at least one half court touch when LeBron was on the court. But when he was on the court and didn't receive a touch, the Cavs offense struggled, shooting 25% from the field. That's crazy. But at the same time, how good is Steph Curry? Hmm. Compared to LeBron James, he's just three players in NBA history who have averaged at least 23 points, 7 assists, and shot 40% from three-point range. Larry Bird, who he's one of the greatest of all time. We know that, one of the greatest small forwards to ever play. Could easily say he's the greatest Celtic to ever play. LeBron James as well. He did it after the 2012 and the 2013 seasons. And Steph Curry. He's on pace to do it this season for a consecutive season. And like I said, folks, that's 23 points, 7 assists, and shooting 40% from three-point range. Very difficult to do. Kyrie Irving did leave the game with a shoulder injury and is supposed to have an MRI today. So we'll have some more information about that and go on ESPN to check that out or any of your other news or media platforms. Kyrie Irving, had 24 points. Kevin Love threw in a nice cool 16, which is about where his game is at right now. He's giving you like an 18 and 12 game, which, in Kevin Love's defense, you have to understand that's kind of the game that Chris Bosh had. And Chris Bosh had games where he took over, but guess what? Chris Bosh has rings now. Kevin Love doesn't. Like I said, for me, the Cavs, I can't give them being the best team in the league. I can't really give them being the best team in the East. Like I said, since the All-Star break, yes. And I know I've probably, not seeming like a bandwagon, but I've been speaking a lot of the Cavs lately because they've been playing phenomenal basketball, especially LeBron James. But you still have the Atlanta Hawks leading the Eastern Conference by 9.5 games in the East. Even without, Chicago Bulls, even without Derrick Rose, I still see the Chicago Bulls making a run because that Eastern Conference is so weak. But for me, defining if the Cavs are the best team in the league, or whatever would have you, calling them the favorites or whatever, that will be determined off of my next point. The Cavs play 8 out of its next 10 games on the road. And this is an extremely challenging stretch that includes at Houston, at Toronto, at Dallas, at San Antonio, and at Miami. So for me, the question is, folks, are the Cavs the best in the league? We'll see after those next 10 games. That road trip is always the hardest, especially because it's on the East and the West Coast. So we'll see. Hopefully Kyrie Irving comes back from that injury very quickly. I think the Cavs do play the Pacers, and I've been told that he won't play, or he's, it's possible that he could play in that game. But LeBron James has definitely thrown himself in the MVP race. I don't think he should win it because if you think about it, he didn't really have the best 2 to 3 months of this NBA season. LeBron's body language has definitely changed, but those first couple of games, he was pouting. He didn't really look like LeBron James. So to me, the MVPs, it's a four race run right now. A 4-run race. I have LeBron James, I have Russell Westbrook, I have James Harden, I have Steph Curry. No particular order, but Russell and LeBron have really, they've made additions to join, Steph Curry and James Harden, who are definitely the two favorites. So, are the Cavs the best team in the league? No, I can't say that right now, folks. We'll see after those 10 games. We'll just see. But right now, I just want to say I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. We kind of had some difficulties, so we'll move on to next week when it comes to the W.C.C.U phone line. We'll get that up and running. We'll have a nice time segment to fit your questions in there so we can get those on the air and so the people can hear what you have to say. I know I have a lot of fellow sports gurus out there. And if you feel like you know sports in your own right, or you have a question, like I said, about your favorite team or your favorite player, get those together. Watch the sports over the weekend. Look at the topics. If something really catches your eye, write it down, keep it in your head, note it, whatever you need to do, and call up here and we'll talk about it on the show. I want to give everybody a chance to, discuss some of the topics that they feel like, we might either leave off of the show or just something that you feel is important. It's all about perception, folks, and like I said, Q&A is about giving you a younger perspective on the game today. And our younger generation's perception of things are just differently. We look at the game differently. But this is the best platform for us to do what we need to do. So, I just want to say I appreciate everybody tuning in and rocking with us for this long. The show's going great. This was actually show number 6, if I'm not mistaken. So, if you're going to continue to keep up with us, please do spread the word. All of them sports gurus, get them to tune in 12 to 1 Wednesdays and Fridays. That's about it, folks. Get familiar with the program. I'm Addison Taylor. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Be blessed. God bless.